of what we were going to talk about. And surprisingly, this has really become a hot topic lately. I think some of the zero trust initiatives and pushes within the executive order lately have made this top of mind for many. So Colin, if you want to go ahead and hit next slide on that. A little bit about Uber Ether. We're a set of identity and access management experts. That's really what we focus on from top to bottom, and where we've done the most damage in the industry is to focus on integrating some of the best of breed identity and access management solutions, so that when customers go to build their identity and access management platforms, they can move very quickly to delivering business value rather than trying to install, configure, integrate, and bring the pieces together. So through our IAM automated, orchestrated, and managed platforms, we allow customers to, and especially in the government space, come up to speed very, very quickly and really skip a lot of those problems of the past, of taking years to even get to a baseline to start delivering value to the agencies. So with me today, Colin, if you want to hit the next one, is Colin Ryan, recent graduate of Radford University, came on just about a year ago with us and has made a tremendous impact on the team. In the last year, he's been onboarding customers within Azure, getting up to speed on Ping, doing SailPoint implementations, and came to me and saw a lot of these problems within his own customers. And so we thought it would be a good idea to bring him on and talk a little bit about the patterns that he's seeing and we're seeing as a company for just-in-time provisioning and some of those problems that it's solving. So hit the next one. So why is this important right now? And I alluded to it in the opening a little bit, but the good news for all of us that are in the identity and access management world is that this was from the Identity Defined Security Alliance, which, if you aren't following already, really excellent resources on getting started with your zero trust journey with identity, as well as running just strong identity governance programs. But 80% of the professionals in, I think this was across CISO organizations, so normally your SOC, your NOC, your identity professionals, your sometimes governance professionals, have said that in the last year, there's been the shift to remote work has pushed a great focus into identity security. And I think that's pretty easy to point to, right? All of us have been working from home. All of our home networks are now more part of our corporate networks. I know even our like corporate tools, we use Sentinel-1 to do our machine scanning, and there's options in there to search people's home networks at this point and see if they have other vulnerable devices that they will go ahead and block those devices from accessing our corporate laptops automatically. But that has increased the risk, and because we're not tied to our corporate firewalls or always forcing people always back through a VPN, because honestly, we couldn't scale them up quick enough. And why are we going to go through a VPN to go back out to the internet to go directly to these SaaS providers anyways and pull email from Google, information from Salesforce? Just right, it doesn't make that much sense from a operations perspective. Maybe we can fight security and different ways to handle that. But so that makes sense. But at the same time, these professionals that are our peers are only 32% are confident that their organizations can secure identities. And the most telling part of that is they ran the same survey the previous year before the pandemic happened, and it was at 49% of organizations. So very much the people in our world are saying, we've expanded the shift and focus on identity, but we all feel less and less confident in our ability to manage and capture that. So, Colin, if you want to hit the next slide, a lot of that, I think, is coming up to this idea of just-in-time provisioning. Right before, excuse me, we would give people corporate laptops, contractor corporate laptops. They would be coming into our offices and plugging in. So we felt a lot more confident. But in the last year, we've moved to doing a lot more federation between agencies, between the contractor organizations. For a while, we weren't even able to get laptops shipped to our team members because the backlog was so high with people moving to working from home, that a lot of organizations were forced to say, okay, we got to let personal devices, or we got to let people's own personal laptops onto the network so they can at least continue working, or else we're dead in the water. And that opened up a lot of doors for complexities and confusion. So when we're looking at just-in-time user provisioning, right, I go back to the spider web graphic, right? We've got traditionally our own IT staff, our own employees are managed from our internal HR systems, and we've got good control over when they're joining, when they're moving, when they're leaving the organization. Contractors, sometimes it's into our ERP systems. And right, we've got them tied to projects or tied to contracts. They might be tied to multiple contracts, but a lot of times that's starting to get moved out a little bit to the outside as well. And people are joining in this just in time that they have their own identity providers. Why are we creating another account internal to our organization that has to be managed and governed separately? Same thing, ex-employees, whether they've left on their own or they've retired from the organization, a lot of times they still have relationships to come in and do 401k management, do changes, right? Those accounts have to be managed. A lot of times I'm seeing organizations let people tie that to their personal Gmail or Yahoo accounts, just so they don't have to deal with the password reset problems and deal with a lot of that consumer problem and reduce costs. But that also is now another identity that needs to be managed in a different way that we haven't been doing. And then suppliers and customers the same way, partners with, if you're in the government, right? We saw a lot of the COVID actions going on, a lot of the information sharing, a lot of organizations working together to try and support and opening up those doors and borders to do SharePoint sharing between organizations, jumping on, right, Atlassian Confluence boards across the organizations, even sharing across Google Docs, right? But all of that, okay, if I have somebody new from a partner organization showing up at my front door, in the past, we might fill out a form and it takes them 2 weeks. That's just not acceptable anymore. And we need to figure out a way to do it, but at the same time, govern everyone's access. So that's where this whole just-in-time provisioning problem starts to get addressed. So Colin, you want to hit the next slide? And I got to hurry up because Colin's got some good walkthroughs. So in general, what just-in-time provisioning allows us to do is say, we're going to set up a trust relationship between us and an outside identity provider. That could be Gmail, google.com, right? That could be personal addresses on Yahoo, on Microsoft, anywhere there's an OpenID Connect. And from a consumer perspective, we can let people come in and we get basic user information about them. Depending on the relationship, that might be tied to an existing internal account. So if you're a healthcare organization, if you're the IRS, right, we kind of know who you are. We'll tie you somehow back to your social security number. As much as we don't like social security numbers and it's PII and dangerous, that's still what we track. A lot of things for like IRS, SSA, that's the government world we live in, right? But being able to say, here's an identity, we're going to allow them to basically link that to an outside identity provider. But when they come in and register, we now have that data from their side as well as the internal metadata that says, okay, here's the accounts they have access to. So that's reducing our need to generate and manage those accounts. Similarly, if we want to share information with a partner organization, or I know with CMMC inside of the defense industrial base, right, we're trying to get organizations to levels 4 and 5 that allow us to say, hey, someone like an Uber Ether, like a Boeing, if you're at those levels, you can bring your own identities. And you've already certified that there is a high level of multi-factor authentication on those identities. And that gets transitioned over as part of the assertions, whether that's OpenID Connect or SAML, that says, hey, I attest that these people have been asserted at these levels. These are the roles they get. These are kind of their attributes of what organization they're on, right? And then that now allows us to take those people in and create their accounts. So we're reducing management burden because we're putting it back where it belongs, of the people who hire and govern those people as an authoritative source. We're reducing our own internal costs because we're not having to go through the employee onboarding, the initial paperwork. We're through our MOUs with those organizations saying these are the minimum requirements for you to allow someone to access, and then we're just asserting those. We might do some light identity proofing to validate that when they show up for the first time, but right, that's a lot easier and can be automated through tools like SailPoint. That, and then again, shifting that risk. How many times do we create accounts for people that are in an organization outside of ours? They leave the organization, we forget to close them off, or we close them off on a quarterly certification review. If we have this federated link set up, as soon as they turn it off on their side, they can't log in anymore, which also means they can't get into our systems, right? And then as their attributes change, as the programs and projects, what they're read into, their training changes, that's all in those home organizations that today we a lot of times force them to do again within our organization. It's frustrating, right? That data just flows back and forth, and that risk stays there, decreasing the configuration, right? Not every time we stand up a new partner, a new organization on our side, we're doing a lot of that manual configuration work. And then it also allows us, as we grow and onboard new SaaS providers, onboard new cloud applications, migrate our own applications, or onboard new things on premises, we've got a centralized pattern and point that is repeatable, that'll grow with the organization. So go ahead and hit the next one. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Colin to talk a little bit about just-in-time user provisioning, how it works in reality. So Colin, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. That was a great introduction. As he said, I recently started with Uber Ether in early 2021. I've been getting my hands on a lot of SaaS products, onboarding them onto Microsoft Azure, and managing their identities. For over a year now, everyone has been working from home. A lot has changed. In difficult times, we were very creative and transitioned faster than ever. Before, we were all in the office sharing laughs and coffee, and now you're drinking your morning coffee with your dogs. We were all in the office on company assets on a secure network, and now we're all on personal networks, connecting to a VPN, logging in with multi-factor authentication to multiple apps every day. Before, we had HR create the accounts for new hires and then hand them their account information on a piece of paper in the office. And now it's gotten a little bit more diluted. A user gets hired, a manager will create their account request creation, and then IT or HR person will create the account. Then you wait for the account to be created, which can take hours, and then the account information gets sent to the manager, and then the manager will eventually pass it down to the employee. With just-in-time provisioning, you're able to cut down the time that it takes to create a new account from hours to less than a minute. Just-in-time provisioning will provision an account for allowed individuals with appropriate permissions. This account is created and functional within 15 seconds of their first authentication from their identity provider. What's great about this feature is that it is so scalable. You're able to create accounts that you needed, no more, no less. Just-in-time provisioning can be applied for as little as one user or as many as an enterprise. The first time that a user authenticates into Identity Now from your identity provider but doesn't have an account, one will be created for them. Basic information from the identity provider is associated with the new account, like first name, last name, and email. Every time that a user logs in, it will check to make sure that if any of their information has changed. For example, if they've recently gotten a promotion, additional permissions may be assigned to them next time they log in. If they change business units, then they will get permissions that fit that role. This tool integrates amazingly with existing investments, integrating directly with your identity provider. Just to name a few, Microsoft Azure, AWS, Ping Federate, and there's many more. Now I'd like to walk you through what happens when you do just-in-time provisioning. In this example, we have a user named Anna, and she works for Google. This example shows how she would access the Army Salesforce environment. Anna wants to access the Salesforce system to update an ongoing project's notes. Thanks to their trusted relationship, Google is allowed into the Army's system. Anna logs in and strongly authenticates to her identity provider, Google Cloud Platform. From there, she clicks on Salesforce, an application that's set up in her identity provider. Ping Federate, an identity provider on the Army side, catches this and realizes that it's Anna's first time logging in to the Army system. Ping will then dissect the SAML assertion from Google Cloud Platform and provides that over a SCIM interface to SailPoint, SCIM, SCIM interface. Ping says to SailPoint, hey, we have a new person, and here is all that I know about her. SailPoint then creates this identity profile, and it will populate with basic information like her name, manager, job title, and more. SailPoint then reaches back out to Ping after provisioning the account, saying, hey, you're all good. You can log into Salesforce. Within seconds, Anna is able to access Salesforce with proper permissions for her role. She's now logged into Salesforce and can go about her business updating her project. Not only is her permission set up for Salesforce, she also gets access to all the applications that fit her role. Every time that she comes into the system, it will check to make sure that her access is up to date. No more, no less permissions. Before, this process could have taken over a day. If Anna was lucky, it was 30 minutes minimum. Now she has access to Salesforce and all the other applications that she may need. Just-in-time is configured with your identity provider with any modern federation. This XML-based authentication method provides a single point of authentication. This form of authentication ensures that credentials are sent only through your identity provider. When configured correctly, this feature works seamlessly. Some people will refer to this process as just enough time or just enough access. When a contractor leaves your company, you want to disable that account as soon as possible. We have found that some agencies have outdated contractor accounts and are finding them months after the person hasn't worked there. Those active accounts pose a grave security threat. Just-in-time provisioning will disable an account as soon as identity provider disables the account, or you can choose to do it manually. Identity Now will act as a big red button. One click will deprovision their access across all applications. Identity Now is also able to create exportable logs with lots of information regarding access and permission. You're easily able to view insights for different applications and users. You can see how many licenses exactly you're using for each application, making the decision for rebuying licenses next year easier. Just-in-time provisioning is a tool that's been prevalent for a long time, but Identity Now has made it easier. With backend attributes being swapped almost instantly, accounts are created and ready to use within seconds. This leads to better user experience and a more secure way to create accounts. Now, back to Matt, and he will explain some additional benefits.
So thanks, Colin. That was an awesome walkthrough. It's incredibly powerful what we're able to do with the just-in-time provisioning capabilities. If you want to just go ahead and hit that next slide. So just to recap what Colin walked through, here's your integrated journey to getting to just-in-time provisioning. And I think this lines up, if I know we have a lot of federally focused people on the call today. So if you have not seen it, there is a zerotrust.cyber.gov website that is asking for public comment right now to address a lot of the executive order and other zero trust initiatives going on. And I think this is one of those key enabling pieces that line up with what's in there perfectly. So first things when you're moving down this path is figure out your federation points, right? Today, a lot of us within government organizations have multiple single sign-on solutions, multiple places where that authentication happens. A lot of times it's separate, whether it's internal federation versus external federation, and the zero trust. It's not the, I think it's the maturity matrix or maturity model document talks about the first thing you do is you have to find those places where all the authentication is happening and centralize that into one, right? And we've had great success with Ping Federate. You can also do the same things with Microsoft's Azure platform, as well as some of the Google platforms, but you want to centralize those points and then figure out what those integration points within that product are. As Colin had said, Ping Federate itself has a SCIM endpoint that is already built in. So it is smart enough to say, hey, this is the first time I've seen this person. So I'm going to send a create user message down to SailPoint through that SCIM interface so that SailPoint knows we've got a new person from the outside. And then from there, SailPoint can figure out what to do with them. Additionally, when it sees that person come in the next time, it will say, I already know that this person exists within our organization, but in this message that's coming across, whether that's OpenID Connect or it's SAML, right? There's attributes here. And I'm going to push that down to SailPoint with an update that says, here's what's changed. So then SailPoint can make the determination as to what permissions and roles and applications that person might need. And that could be a, hey, they took new training, which allows them to get access to certain data sets that we have. They moved to a new role that they now get access to new entirely different applications, or we might want to take things away based on that relationship and those attributes. But that link to SailPoint from your federation identity provider is key to this first start. And then work on determining what attributes you're going to exchange with each of those organizations. The place I suggest people start with that is login.gov has defined both from a SAML as well as a developer for login.gov website. And you can find that through GSA, but they've defined a SAML and an OpenID Connect profile that sets those base attributes. And it also takes care of putting in values there for how strong their authentication was. Was it username and password only? Was it multi-factor? Was it AAL3 multi-factor, which includes identity proof, right? It gives us those different levels. And additionally, there is the iGov profile from the OpenID Foundation that has been in place for, I think, close to 5 years now. So both of those have different benefits, but those are the two places I would start. And then from there, now that you've figured out how to centralize and where these authentications are going to come from within your organizations, that SCIM message that goes down to SailPoint. So initially, we're just going to create a SailPoint cube, and SailPoint's going to say, I'm going to give people basic access. So normally that's, we're going to put them in an Active Directory somewhere. We're going to put them in an enterprise directory with Ping or Radiant Logic, or maybe push them up to a guest account within Microsoft Azure if you've moved to Azure AD, but have SailPoint broker that initial creation of the account. And they just get basic information. Step one, right? Now we're at least in the door and have the person identified. Step two becomes, okay, based on those attributes that we've set up with our partner organizations, what applications should they get access to? And you've already got a lot of those already built into your SailPoint implementation, and you're doing it today, right? When you're registering these people within your systems, but now we can trigger it automatically instead of a request and approval process. Or if we do need to continue doing a request and approval process, at least that account is immediately created that they can come into SailPoint and start those requests as they exist today. Even if we don't have all those attributes being exchanged between the orgs we want, you still have an ability to enable people immediately instead of waiting or sending an email or making a phone call or filling out a PDF form and then uploading it to a SharePoint portal, right? You're centralizing all of that from a risk, a policy, a audit and approval perspective within the SailPoint tool itself. And then we start extending that, right? Now that we've got those attributes flowing, hopefully those partnerships, those patterns are starting to emerge within the federate side, that we can then start sharing more attributes and pushing those out. And then those get us finer grained access into those applications. So not only are you getting access to the SharePoint site, you're getting access to the right sites within SharePoint or the right sets of data that's available to you through Power BI or whatever that internal platform is to start looking at the data, running queries. And then also you can start extending to contextual profiles. So not only can we send the skim messages down, not only can we send those open from OpenID Connect and SAML, but we can also start saying, hey, this is a person, but I've never seen them from this device before, or I've never seen them from, a lot of times it's going to be the device, but from this location, or this time of day is weird for them. So some of that contextual risk you get from your identity provider, which, like I said, Ping, Azure, Google, right? All of that stuff that is contextual access based on how they're logging in, where they're logging in from, can also be pushed down, that we can change our policies based on that to say, this is risky. We're going to take away some stuff right now. Or that might be the same identity, but all of a sudden they're only using a username and password and not their CAC. Right. So when those sessions are initiated, we can make some changes. And we can talk about different ways to enforce that at both the app layer as well as the SailPoint policy layer. But those are the things we're going to get moving into next. And then the last step is really working with those providers to synchronize that data. So, right, it's great that when the person logs in, we get these messages. But what about the time in between? And this is something that a lot of organizations do not do very well today, but within OpenID Connect, there's something called the user info endpoint. So within SailPoint, we can schedule to say, hey, this person came from this agency, this external identity provider. We're going to call that user info endpoint and see if it's changed. So if they're now disabled over there, we're going to know about it. And they're going to not get data that they might have subscribed to, because a lot of our systems today are, oh, I'm going to come in, run this query from an external organization, subscribe to it, and then I'm going to get a daily email. And I'm not going to come back for another month until I need to update that report. But guess what? They've lost their permissions. They've lost their roles. They've lost their training. But we don't have that because they haven't come in through SAML again. So user info allows us to go back, get that freshest info, and update it within our existing identity repositories. So user info on the OpenID Connect side, or backend attribute exchange on the SAML side, that's been, I believe, 10 plus years within the federal government. So those interfaces should exist today. And then based on risk, you figure out what those refresh schedules are, right? Sometimes you want to refresh those things once a day. Sometimes it's okay to refresh once a month or once a week. But that's really up to your organization to figure out, based on the user, what they have access to, what that risk you're having by not getting those latest attributes on a regular basis. So real quick, we got a minute to go. I have not seen any questions come in. So I'm going to hold you all accountable to throw any questions you might have in here in the last few seconds. But Colin, can you roll to the last major slide here? So why are we doing this now? There are some emerging standards for these interactions that are under what's on a bigger umbrella called CAPE, Continuous Authorization Profiles. And it will allow us to exchange token information for people logging in, as well as build in the backdoors to refresh the user data, but also trade security events. So if the person's device is compromised on the other side, they can send messages down to your systems, down to your agency to say, hey, this person's been compromised, or they're resetting their password, or they have a new CAC card, right? We're going to tell you about it because this is a higher risk transaction for this person. Or if you on your side say, hey, this person all of a sudden is logging in from a different point in the world at a different time, we think this is risky, you can tell them about it, right? And it gives you that bi-directional, both for user info, credential infos, to have that conversation between the identity providers. So this is all setting things up for this next generation of real-time enforcement, which will be key as we're all moving towards this zero trust architecture that, based on the documents that were published a week ago, we're all on hook for to have implemented within the next 2 years. So it's the shared services or security event ID working groups, the CAPE profiles, the risk profiles. They're already being rolled out in major identity providers. SailPoint's working on it. Ping Identity is working on it. Microsoft's working on it. Salesforce is working on it. So all of these big providers are starting to set that up. And we got to make sure that between our identity endpoints, between our organizations, that we're ready for it. It's really what's going to enable that zero trust solution moving forward. And SailPoint's a huge part of that. So with that, last slide, just any questions that might come in. And then appreciate everyone signing in today. I know these are always a little bit of a rapid fire approach to identity, but hopefully we set this up for at least starting to think about this, starting to plan for this, and long-term success within your organizations. Colin, thank you for joining me today. This was your first big professional presentation, and I just got to say in front of everyone that joined today, that was an awesome job, and thank you for that. So at this point, we'll turn it back to Katie to close up.
All right. Thank you, Matt and Colin, for being here with us today. For all the participants, we hope this information that you received during today's webinar has been helpful for both you and your organization. As a reminder, everybody will receive a recording of the presentation and a follow-up email. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to call or email us. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.